Welcome, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, as we get rolling and talking about your chapter in Life Repurposed, I wanted to know, what is your favorite thrift store find?
Oh my goodness. It would have to be, I collect this pattern of china called My Blue Heaven. And whenever I can find a piece of that in a thrift store, I get so jazzed because normally it's really pricey and I never pay a big price for them. So I'll get them for like $1 a piece, and that really makes me happy.
Nice. Yeah. So, thrift store is something that you've done a lot over the years, I imagine, with all the moves that you've done.
That is the best way to get settled into a new area. And really, it's sort of like sightseeing at the same time. So while we're outfitting our home, we're also getting to know our area better. So I love doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've moved a lot of times in your life.
I've lost track. I think it's 23. The number of surgeries I've had and the number of addresses I've had are about the same number.
So, you've run out of fingers and toes to count on
That's
now.
that's what it is. That's why I can't remember.
Yeah, because otherwise you could just list them off and see. So, in the chapter in Life Repurposed, you talk a little bit, you just alluded to surgeries. You talk a little bit about some of your story, having gone through more than one surgery in your life. And you also talk about furniture. You talk about a special piece. I'm not going to give the whole thing away, but what was the piece that you talked about in that chapter?
Oh, it was a beautiful cherry Queen Anne's dining set. And it was something I had wanted for a long time. We bought it brand new, which we never do that. And I won't give it all away, but when things get destroyed and distressed, then you realize your priorities might need to be a little different.
It's so hard though with something new. I think about like when I got my car, which is a few years old, it was the first new car I've ever bought in my life. That first scratch is really hard.
Yeah, it's brutal. And then you kind of scold yourself for being that attached to it because you know you shouldn't be. But yeah, the first one is not pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, so like new house, new furniture. You've lived in at least one new house too.
We did. We
So,
built one from scratch.
yeah, what was that like to get the first scuff?
Well, before we moved in, we had the blue tape day where you go in and you tape every scuff that the builder made that you
Oh
want repaired
yeah.
before you even move in. We counted over 100 of those
Oh
blue tapes.
my.
I had no idea how we would even move in. And all of a sudden, it was all better. We moved in, it was glorious. But like you said, it didn't last for long. And then the first one hit, and you have to learn that your priorities need to change, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like life in that, I don't know how many of our listeners are perfectionists, but, we have a certain way we want things to go, and then life doesn't exactly go that way. But I know your life has gone perfectly from birth to now, right?
Right, from exactly at birth until now, something has happened.
Yeah. So you tell a little bit of your story in the chapter in Life Repurposed. I love your title in that you titled it Use Me Broken. Sometimes we think we need to have everything all in a certain order. Everything has to be perfect in life before God will use us. Tell me a little bit about why you chose that title for your chapter.
Well, I think because I'm not as much a perfectionist as some people, but I really want to put my best foot forward, and I have a checklist for my checklist, and I really want everything to be just right. And especially serving the Lord, I want to give him my excellence. But when I realized even if I did my best, it wouldn't be as good as God deserves, but that's not what he wants anyway. He just wants me. And when I realized he could use me broken, it was life
Mm.
changing for me.
So, have you ever had a time when you were waiting for, like, putting something on pause and thinking, when this happens, then I will?
Sure. I mean, the one right now is the pandemic. We're
Mhm.
all wondering what the new normal will be. I've had to self isolate due to my health conditions. And it's funny, I would dream along, well, when this happens, like, well, when I get the
Mm.
vaccine, then this will happen. And then now I'm realizing it's still not going to be what I anticipated. And
Mhm.
I think that's the problem with our expectations. They never turn out exactly as we think they will, but sometimes they turn out better. God has something different in mind. And as long as we're willing to go with that and not be so tied down or married to our
Mhm.
concept of what we think it will be, then it goes better.
Mhm. Now we're both writers, so we know a lot of other writers, and I've met people who are waiting until a certain moment in life before they launch, before they really do the thing they believe God has called them to. What do you think is the challenge with waiting like that?
The challenge with having a deadline for when you will do something is it causes procrastination, I think. And
Mhm.
also, there's never an ideal scenario. And if we're not willing to just dive in while we're broken and do it, I don't know a day that will come that will be the ideal day. For
Mhm.
example, if we waited for the muse or the whim to hit for us to write and we're on a deadline, we will look at a blank page.
Yeah.
But if we just do the work and we plug ourselves in while we're in the midst of whatever messy scenario we're in, rather, if we wait for the ideal day, it just won't happen.
Mhm. Yeah, so you're known as God's Grin gal, and one of those is a reputation for being able to find something, a piece of joy, a moment to just really look at where God's at work in the midst of that. When did you realize that you were God's Grin gal?
It was I was totally rebranding myself and realizing that the here I am a branding expert and I had myself branded all wrong. So I needed I needed to take a step back and listen to what other people said about me. And over people would say, "I don't know how you can grin through that." And that's when I would say, "Well, I'm grinning with grace or I'm grinning
Mhm.
with joy." And and it was an opportunity to explain that the grin goes a lot deeper than the surface. And if my heart's not grinning, then you're not going to see it on the outside. But it's because of something going on deep down, is why I can have that grin.
Mhm. So you then turn that into a ministry for other people. What are you most passionate about?
Oh, wow. There's so many fun passions I get to be involved in every single day. I think helping other people risk doing things in the midst of being broken and helping them shine through that
Mhm.
and not be so overcome with whatever tarnish they're wearing that day that it keeps them from being what God has for them.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, I can see that in your writing. You write a lot. You've written a lot of devotionals that people can find online, and I'll make sure we link up to those. I see a common thread coming through all of those, and that is that you encourage other people, but you're also really transparent in telling your own story. What's been the hardest part of telling your story?
Well, being misunderstood, I think, would
Mm,
be the hardest part because no matter how much I'm willing to be an open book, if someone else has gone through a rough day, they may hear something I say and think it's
mm,
not authentic or assume that I'm faking my way through faith instead of just living out my mess in front of people. I mean, there's a
mm,
difference between the two. And so, yeah, I would say being misunderstood is the hardest because you really risk you're vulnerable when you share your
mhm.
story with other people.
What has been your favorite result, though, of being vulnerable?
Oh, the best result is when someone comes and tells you because of being vulnerable, because of hearing that story, that it was life changing for them. I will never forget at an event when a woman waited in line to talk to me, and that was what she said. And she was a pastor. She says, "I've studied grace my entire life, but what you said about grace was life changing." And it was just because I showed how it looks in everyday life. And she was able to grasp a hold of it and apply it.
I love that. So, if you had not decided to step forward and let God use you as you are, then you'd miss out on that opportunity to minister to somebody else's life, to help them experience a transformation. You've written about joy, but I wanted to have you tell a little bit about the book that you wrote, Seven Trials Every Woman Faces, because I think our listeners can relate to that.
Yeah, I started that book because I have several coping mechanisms and humor is one of them. And so one of the things I say when I'm having a bad day is Job a member of my family tree? And that's just always gotten me through a bad time. And so I started writing this study about Job, but more importantly, how the same 7 trials he had, we as women have today. And so I looked at each one of those trials in a way that's really transparent. It was probably a difficult one to write because it showed my pain in the deepest degrees, and it showed the ways other people could have helped me along the way and ways I want to help other people along the way. So that's why that book is so important to me, because the trials we go through, either we will grow for them or someone else will grow from them. So sometimes the trial isn't about us at all. It's to help someone else out.
Yeah, so where can people find that book?
They can go to my website, kathycarltonwillis.com. They can go to Amazon, or they can order it through their bookstore.
I'm going to link up to your website in the show notes because you have many other resources there that listeners can get. You've been on the show before talking about your book about joy. And so just briefly mention a couple of the other titles that you have.
Well, I started out with Grin with Grace, and that's another one of my coping phrases when someone says, well, how did you get through that? Well, I just grinned with grace. That's how you get through things. So I have that book. I have a book for speakers who want to learn how to be more proficient in their speaking or setting it up as a business. And you mentioned the Joy book, The Grin Gal's Guide to Joy. It's a Bible study, so it's set up like a workbook. If people are meeting in groups, they can even do it in group time. And you mentioned the 7 Trials book, which really is, it's a beautiful book, and it helps people take a look at some hard things, but still have a grin on their face when they're done.
Mm-hmm. And now you're helping other people with writing and getting published. And so you have another book that just released.
Yes, we just had a party for it yesterday, Wit, Whimsy, and Wisdom. And I have a group called Word Girls to coach writers who are women of faith through their writing process. And so we put together 84 devotions. It's a beautiful book, and we really are praying that it ministers to people. It's been cool to hear the feedback already about how it has helped people out. So that one has been fun to not just incorporate my writing, but to see other people shine.
Kathy, as we wrap up our short chat here today, what would you like to leave with the reader who's picked up your chapter? They're reading Use Me Broken. What do you want to say to them?
I think brokenness looks different to different people, but you don't have to look too far before you find it in your own life. And so don't try to gloss it over with some polish. Don't think that it disqualifies you from being used from God, but know that the very thing you're broken about is probably something that's going to speak deeply to someone else if you're willing to be transparent about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.